Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the second video out of the series of the Synchronization Editor, which is new in Identity Manager version 7. Today, together with me, again, Marcus Weiss-Ehlers. He's the Senior Program Manager for the Identity Manager, and he wants to show us something about the Synchronization Editor. We want to step through that tool, and Marcus will tell us now what we will see.
Hello everybody. So what we're going to do is we're going to show you in a quick walkthrough all the new features of the Synchronization Editor. So we're going to show you how to configure a synchronization project. We're going to show you how a mapping is defined, so how to map properties from one target system to one identity manager. And we're going to show you how a workflow is configured, so which mapping steps should be executed for each synchronization project. We're going to take a quick peek at what are the logging features of the new synchronization and what are the other new configuration or debugging features of the new synchronization editor.
Perfect. So let's change seats and then we will start to show you something.
Okay.
The Identity Manager version 7 Synchronization Editor is a tool to manage synchronization projects. A synchronization project is stored as every other data in the One Identity Manager database. The synchronization project itself, it's built out of a lot of different parts. One of them is the connection to the database. Here is defined which One Identity Manager database is the target for any synchronization process. Connection to the database is something that is automatically set, so you have typically not to correct this connection information. Connection to the target system is the one that is to configure for every synchronization project. There are different configuration steps to configure, and this is depending on the target system type. For example, an LDAP will be completely different connected than a CSV file form. Another part is the property mapping and the object matching. Both rule types can be defined manually, but for known target systems like Active Directory or SAP or something like that, there is a standard mapping and matching defined and set by using the connection wizard for that specific target systems. For any third-party target systems, or if you like, you can as well do the complete property mapping and object matching manually. The startup configuration contains the following parts: the variable set, which is the variables containing the information which target system with which account have to be accessed. The synchronization workflows that define for each object class, if you like, filters and the synchronization direction. The synchronization direction itself could be as well configured on the startup configuration and inherited on the workflows, the revision of the synchronization project, and at the end a schedule that defines how often the synchronization will run. Most of these configuration steps could be automatically set by a wizard, but it is as well possible to create them step by step on your own. As you probably know, workflow, it's a word often heard with the One Identity Manager, and in the past we have had two workflow types, which was the approval workflows and the fulfillment workflows. With the One Identity Manager version 7, we get a third workflow type in addition. Let's talk about all of these. Approval workflows are the workflow you typically use in IT shop to define decision makers who have to decide what you want to get. They can as well be used during attestation or to grant or deny exceptions for compliance processes. Fulfillment workflows are the workflows executed by the One Identity Manager services and defining the business process automation. Fulfillment workflows are as well known as processes. With version 7 now, the new workflow type, synchronization workflows, was defined, and synchronization workflows defining the synchronization direction and synchronization order for target system synchronization steps. Synchronization workflows are a part of a synchronization project. They configure the synchronization directly, and they are defined for one specific process step, which is of type synchronization. Known from some other amazing software products, there is the mapping versus matching concept. We know now the same terms in One Identity Manager, but to make fully clear what we are talking about, please let me just define these concepts again. First of all, the matching rule. Matching rules are needed to identify objects existing in two different systems. For example, if there's our one identity manager database and on the other side a target system, there should be a represence of every object from the target system side as well in the database. Once we have just inserted all the data from target systems into the database, there must be something that defines a reference between an according database object and the target system object. This kind of rule is called matching rule, and it helps to identify corresponding objects. In difference to that exists the property mapping rule. Property mapping rules are necessary to know which target system property should be stored on a database column. For example, if you want to know where the SAM account name of an Active Directory account is stored, then the property mapping rules will tell you this is the column SAM account in the table ADS account. Such a property mapping rule should exist for every property we want to handle in the One Identity Manager. Like a lot of other configuration, as well, object matching rules and property mapping rules are stored in the database, and they will be automatically set for every third-party target system, or if you like perform a manual configuration, you have to define them manually on your own.
We've loaded the synchronization project, and we're going to show you now in a quick walkthrough mostly all of the features of the synchronization editor. Let's start with the settings. You find this in the database menu, and here you can configure the language the tool runs in and some UI features like if the system or the tool should show you hints or explanation warnings and examples. And if you are experienced with the synchronization editor, you're going to turn this feature off here, because this will save you some screen estate, and you will see what I mean when we go further into the features of the synchronization editor. The expert mode allows you or enables some of the more advanced features we are going to disable out of the box for the normal users. When the expert mode is enabled, you will see more steps during the connection wizard that connects a target system to One Identity Manager, and there are some other features that are only interesting for special use cases. So by default, the system runs with a disabled expert mode. Technical view after program start. This mainly covers the display of columns or captions for database properties and database tables and some other stuff, as well as show additional data. So the next area is the start page. On the start page on top, you see here the currently loaded synchronization project, and if the project is activated, as we explained earlier, only activated projects are going to use during the synchronization and provisioning task from the system. You can verify your project, and then you will see if all workflows, mappings, and matching rules are correctly configured. And the start page is used to create a new synchronization project and to load one of the existing synchronization projects out of the database. So now we are going to show you the configuration section of the synchronization editor, and the top two entries are covering the connections that are part of the synchronization project. So on top you will always find the One Identity Manager connection, and one item beneath the target system. Both pages look very similar, so we're going to concentrate on the target system side here. And on the connection here, you can configure if a connection is read-only. That would mean that no provisioning step would be executed for the target system. You can configure the synchronization log, and we'll take a look at that. So if changes to system object and or modified properties and values should be locked, those changes will be locked in additional tables inside of One Identity Manager, and there are reporting features that show you all the changes that have been made during a synchronization or provisioning run. On the right hand side you will find a wizard that allows you to change the connection, and so when you fire this up you will mainly see the connection wizard again, as you have seen that in another video of the series about the synchronization editor. And what is very helpful in custom installation is that you have a browse feature here. When you click on the browse feature, you will mainly have a target system browser, and for every connector inside of One Identity Manager 7 you will have the feature of accessing the target system using the connector of One Identity Manager, so you can check with the synchronization components if you have access to all the objects and all the properties you should have access to in your synchronization project. So let's take a user object here as an example, and you can see here that you have access to all the properties the connector is able to read out of the target system.
And hey, there's a save button. Is that a tool that can as well write something to the target system?
Yes, it can.
Okay, that means it replaces more or less the synchronization editor we have had before, or the testing tool we have used to
the namespace provider tester. Yes, so this is a complete replacement for the namespace provider tester, and this could be used during your configuration of the synchronization project to test if you have access, or not only read access but also write access to the properties you want to change in the target.
That means the interface that is used if you use that browser is exactly the interface that the sync will use as well.
Exactly. So the next feature are scopes. And scopes are used to define subsets of data in the target system or one identity manager that are used during the synchronization. There are two types of scope. One scope is a normal scope where you can define, let's say, LDAP queries or database queries to limit the amount of data that is going to be synced. And the other one is a reference scope. And reference scope is only offered by target systems that have a hierarchy inside of the target system. Let's say in Active Directory that these are the container structure, and you could reduce the amount of data that is going to be used in the sync by selecting specific containers only for the synchronization. Currently all the containers are enabled, but you could change or remove, let's say, this one or that one for the synchronization. And you can see the connection parameters, so username and password. You can see here that those are assigned to variables. We come to that in the next step, and you can take a look at the schema classes that are defined or used in the synchronization project, for example computers, contacts, containers, and all that stuff. And you have a small schema browser that allows you to show or to take a look at the schema the connector is able to fetch from the target system. In that case here, you would see what are the properties you can see for a computer object. See here all the properties from the target system.
So that means if we compare that, for example, with an ADSI editor, then the first browser you showed us was the data browser showing us the data in our Active Directory domain. And that browser here shows us the schema information so that we know how the schema is built.
Exactly. Okay, and that's it for the target system connector or for the connector settings. So let's move on to the variables. Variables are used inside of the synchronization editor to allow you to use one synchronization project to use this for more than one target system. So all the connection settings, like if you use or want to read the terminal properties or look for tombstones or whatever, how the root DN of the domain is named and the server to connect to can be configured using variables. That means you can use the same synchronization project for more than one domain inside of one identity manager, which is a huge step forward from the older versions where you have to configure the same synchronization mapping and schema settings for all the domains of your forest. And to make life easier, you can assign all the variables to specialized variable sets. So you can create a new variable set. This is my EAM domain. And then you can reconfigure some of the variables for the synchronization project. Let's say I don't want to use the terminal settings here. And so I've created a specialized variable set.
And all of these variable sets itself can then be assigned to one of these synchronization projects.
Yeah, we will see that in the next step.
Oh, that's good.
Okay, so move on to the startup configurations. And you can see here the two startup configurations we have already created. Use the default variable set. Let's say we want to change the variable set for the initial synchronization. You can choose here the variable set that is used for this synchronization configuration. More features here on the right hand side. You can start the synchronization here directly from the synchronization editor, and you will have two modes. One is execute the synchronization directly from the job server, or in the expert mode it's possible to execute the synchronization here inside the synchronization editor for debugging purposes if you create your own synchronization projects. Please be aware that means the synchronization will be run on the workstation you're running the synchronization editor on, so that means it will take maybe a lot of RAM and CPU power to run the synchronization. And another feature is to simulate the synchronization. Means what would the system do if I run the startup configuration now? So it will show you, hey, those steps will be executed and those steps will not be executed. So we move on to the base object, and base objects are mainly the synchronization point for a target system synchronization. So in that case here, the base object is the Active Directory domain, And let's assume we want to add a new Active Directory domain using the same synchronization project. You can do that here using the base object wizard that would create all the necessary settings to add a new domain to that synchronization project. So there will be new variable sets and all that stuff.
That means just if you compare that together with the connections we have discussed before, connections contains as well the target system type and all the stuff around. And here we only just add another connection point. That means another domain, so that we can use the same connection just with another connection point.
You're right. So now we move on to the mappings of a synchronization project. And the mappings define the different types of objects that are part of the synchronization project, like in our Active Directory synchronization here, containers, forest groups, and whatever is necessary to sync the Active Directory domain. And let's take a look at one of these mappings. And I'm going to choose container because it's less complex than the others. And if you double click on the container mapping, you see the mapping editor. The mapping editor is mainly built by 4 parts. On the left-hand side, you have all the properties that are part of one identity manager for the specific object. In that case, it is an ADS container table object. On the right-hand side, you will find all the properties from the target system as the connector is able to see them. The upper middle part contains the object matching rules. So the object matching rules define how to identify which object from the target system matches to what object inside of one identity manager. And the bottom middle part defines what should the system or the synchronization do for the specific properties of a specific object that is matched from the target system side to the one identity manager side. I'm going to show you one example of an object matching rule. So I'm going to double click here the distinguished name matching rule. You will see here that mainly a matching rule consists of a property on the target system side that is used to match a property on the one identity manager side.
And what you mean is that this rule here identifies an object. That means objects from the left side gets automatically matched to the objects on the right side, and that on the basis of that specific property combination.
Exactly. Property mapping rule defines how the data flows during the synchronization from one side to the other side. And let's take a simple example, for example, the description. I'm double clicking the description here. So here you can edit a mapping rule, and you have several options that can be configured. And if you are overwhelmed with all the options, there's a wizard option that allows you to select the settings by use case. For example, if one identity manager should be the master, I'm clicking on that, and the system configures all the settings accordingly. The properties for the specific objects are or can be separated in 2 parts. One are the native properties, for example, an object USN or an object key manager, that are really part of the specific object, like on the one identity manager side. This property really exists in the database, and there are some virtual properties. And the virtual properties are used to transform data during the synchronization. So the data transformation, when you map data from one property on the right-hand side to a property on the left-hand side, is not converted by the mapping rule, but by specific virtual properties. And let's going to show you the difference between the native property and the virtual property. And let's say I'm going to click here on the state property. And I'm doing a double click here. You can see the state property, the display name, what data type it is. In that case, it's a string. It's a multi-value property and all the other stuff that is used to define a property. And now I'm going to click on a virtual property here. This is the virtual property UID ADS domain. You can see here when I'm clicking on the property, the system highlights the real property UID ADS domain, and that means that the real property is used somehow inside of the virtual property. Now double click the virtual property, and you can see here that this is the virtual property is of type key resolution by reference. That means it takes a value, in that case a distinguished name, and searches the primary key UID ADS domain in the table ADS domain to get the real value it has to store in the property UID ADS domain. So this is mainly an automated converter, and there are several converters that are part of the system you can use, and I'm going to show you just a few of them so that you get an idea. There are several converters. So there are bit mask converters, fixed value properties, converter for multi-value properties, the key resolution by reference we showed you as example, and we'll show you some of the virtual property types in the third part of this video series. So we move on to the workflows of the synchronization editor, and I'm just open up one of the workflows, and the workflow defines which of the mappings should be executed during your synchronization run. And as you can see here, the initial synchronization workflow contains several objects: domain, forest, trusted domains, container, and all the other objects that are necessary to read the properties from the Active Directory. And just going to do a quick run through some of the settings here. So if you click on the workflow, you can define the synchronization direction, for example, explicitly from one identity manager or into one identity manager or into the target system, or if it's as it's defined here, defined by execution, the startup configuration defines which way should the synchronization going to be executed. If the revision filtering is going to be used, you can configure here, and exception handling and all that other stuff. And I'm just taking one of the objects here, let's say container, to stay by the same example. And if you open up the workflow step for containers, you will see here that this workflow step is defined to read the information from the target system to one identity manager. I'm going to click on edit. You have several more options, like explicitly set the synchronization direction. Again, we already seen the processing options, and a new feature in one identity manager 7 is you can define quotas for the synchronization of the objects. And what the system is going to do then, it will first run a quota run and deleting objects just 2%. And then the system will first identify if it has to delete more than 2% of objects for that specific type of object during the synchronization run. And if that's the case, it will log an error message and do not execute the synchronization, which is a quite neat feature, or a long requested feature for the synchronization of an identity manager. Another nice feature is there's an report that shows the execution plan. So execution plan means if you would run that synchronization workflow, what objects are going to be part of the synchronization workflow and what properties are going to be used in that synchronization workflow. And if you can see here, you will find all the objects like forest, domain, DNS, and I'm going to scroll down to the container. You can see here that this synchronization step, what properties are mapped in what direction from the target system identity manager. And what you see here, that the system is also able to use automatically some steps to the synchronization workflow, because you find here that the system detects that the parent container maybe can only be set in a second step, because if a container has a dependency on its parent container, but the parent container is read as second object, the system will automatically detect that and taking care of that, so that using one synchronization run, all the objects are read in correct order, and everything is correctly synced in the end. So now I'll move on to the logging feature. And so the system, when you have it configured, writes or logs all the sync runs and all the provisioning runs. You can enable the provisioning runs here. And I just want to show you a small glimpse of the logging. So this is the first initial synchronization of our Active Directory synchronization project. And you can see here all the object operations, ADS accounts, insert updates, and that were processed during that specific synchronization run. And let's switch to to the provisioning jobs. So this is the logging for what has a system written out to the target system during a specific provisioning. Let's open this. You can see here that there's one user object was part of this provisioning step, and then you can take a look at the details. So currently in that release, you will only see here the object information. In the final version, we will see here details to the properties that have been updated for the specific object. To finish our quick run through the synchronization editor, I want to point you to the status bar here on bottom. You always see what is the current synchronization project that is loaded, in our case here the initial Active Directory synchronization. And you can see here if the one identity manager has established a connection with the target system, so it was able to connect to the Active Directory in that case. And the exclamation mark here points you to the fact that the database encryption is currently not available, so the database is not encrypted at this point in time.